Thank you very much. We've got lots of questions, so I don't think we'll be able to go through all of them. But so you've described different Druidic orders and their approaches. And someone is asking, do you think the difference between these groups create a richer tradition, or is it make it harder to define what Druidry really is? Is there some sort of an authentic Druidic order?
Well, we don't have any authentic images of ancient Druids, so we don't have that test, which releases us to celebrate diversity in Druidry as in so much else.
Perhaps we'll take someone perhaps from the audience. Any question? No? Okay. Oh, okay. The gentleman over there.
3 at once.
We'll have plenty online though. Thank you.
Couple of questions. Where do the white robes come from? Were there any particular distinctive directions that Druidry went when it's kind of spread out to the ex-colonies, the sort of other parts of the English-speaking world? And which version of Druid, obviously if it's the sort of demonic type that you say, but which type of Druid would you say you join up with, had to, if you had no?
Well, clearly I wouldn't want to join a type of Druidry which would oblige me to stab human victims, or indeed join anything else that did. I clearly, as a bespectacled, gentle academic, I like the peace-giving, sociable kind, but that occurs in lots of varieties. It spread across the entire English-speaking world and into Germany and Scandinavia, and indeed Finland as well. And why the white robes? Because, again, we're clutching at straws here. Pliny, the ancient Roman natural historian, had said that when mistletoe is found on an oak in the south of France, the local priests of the tribes, he doesn't call them Druids, but they would have been, put on a white robe to harvest it with a golden sickle. And that's the only colour check we get, so that was grabbed. And the reason why they have long beards and hooded robes and staffs is that when the Germans kicked off the whole national enthusiasm for Druids, they found images of statues like this at an early monastery in South Germany. We know they actually represented Greek philosophers. The Germans at the time thought they represented Druids, which is why that's been the image of the Druid ever since, because the image has got reproduced in all the books across Europe. And that's why a wizard now looks like. That's why Gandalf looks like that.
All right, another question from online. So you've described, public ceremonies as Stonehenge and the Universal Bond, and then the place with Arthur Pendragon. But someone is asking, like many Druids prefer private, solitary practice. What are the advantages and challenges of practicing Druidry in solitude versus in group?
They are the usual advantages for doing anything in those respective situations. If you have a correspondence course or a book, then being a solitary Druid is very easy and it's very viable. And it's certainly a response to the need of people for space, the ability to connect through the internet. I know very few people who practice traditions as solitaries, who are literally solitary in the sense they never talk to anybody. Yeah. It's just they tend to talk online. And as for doing things in actual physical groups, there are clear advantages there.
Another question going through, someone is saying that in Irish, the term druid, I won't try to pronounce it in Irish, can also be used to mean sorcerer or diviner. Are this area where Druidry and witchcraft overlap?
Not really, because witchcraft as a term is often tainted with a sense of the malevolent. Druidecht, druidcraft, which is the Irish term for magic, is completely neutral. It's worth realizing that although the Celtic-speaking peoples, Irish, Welsh, Highland Scots, Island Scots, had hags as aggressive, scary female figures, they didn't have a witch figure like peoples in many other parts of Europe. So magic's a neutral force, and to be a druid is to be a magician, a spiritual specialist. So you can use those powers as a priest, or you can use them for operative magic. And in Irish literature, the category is very porous. Anybody is a druid when they're practicing magic, no matter what else they are the rest of the time. But of course, a full-time spiritual specialist is a full-time druid.
Thank you. I think we had another question from a person at the front.
There's some over there, I saw.
Oh, there. Oh, yes.
I'm curious. I know in the United States there's a lot of appropriation by white supremacist organizations of kind of Scandinavian Viking mythology and symbolism. In the UK or in other places, have you seen much appropriation by similar groups of druidic imagery or culture, or is that very separate?
Not really. In many ways, Scandinavian Germanic paganism can link very much to ideas of blood and race because of the connection to a particular ethnicity. Druids are, for a start, they link lots of different peoples. They're supranational. But also, they've been around in the imagination for so long, they don't have the cutting edge kind of quality needed to radicalize a political group. And they are built into the Welsh national consciousness in such a comfy way that the royal family, as said, could be members. So the political face of Druidry is protest, as in Arthur Pendragon and his many followers.
We'll have time for just one last question. So there was, I believe, another person over there.
Yes. You've been waiting for a while.
Sorry, thank you. That was really wonderful.
Can you speak up?
Thank you. I wondered, you touched on the fact that this is sort of supranational, transnational. Have other countries followed a similar sort of trajectory in the development of the image of Druidism?
The answer is they all started doing it. But in the 18th century, the enormous British enthusiasm for Druids meant the British increasingly cornered the market in them. And after all, there are more problems abroad. The French were never quite sure whether they were German. They were the Franks, an invading German tribe, or they were Celtic, the native Gauls. They suddenly decided they were Celtic after Germany became a mortal enemy in 1871, but it was getting a bit late. So Druids are big in Brittany because of the Celticism of the Breton culture. But again, because they're so big in Brittany, that inhibits the other types of French from linking to them the same way. So it's the English-speaking nations in which Druids work most powerfully in the imagination. But it was quite different half a millennium ago when most of Western Europe was going wild over them.
Well, thank you very much, Professor, for this wonderful lecture. And please join us for Professor Hutton's next lecture on the 14th of May.